Whatever this is, that will have,
They're trying
but we don't. So we don't come back. No, we don't have a quorum, so we weren't gonna do that anyway.
Is there an agenda for this meeting? I haven't seen one.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
It's an unofficial meeting. Basically, this is just for question and answers, for information, for anybody that's, public's supposed to have a bunch of questions. We've had a couple different options that people want to get some more information on. That's all this is for. There won't be
Okay.
any action taken or anything tonight.
That's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you know how much money it's gonna cost? So I would presume the goal is eventually we want to.
I don't think that there's, the last I heard is we won't find that out until we agree to join the rural. That's just where I'm coming in late on this. Yeah,
Well, I thought the amount to join the district, we won't know until we join.
maybe that's what it is.
But
You know,
the cost of like
I'm
being back
like-
in charge of our water.
I'm like the last person. I mean, I've basically talked to two. I've talked to one alderman. I've talked to one person that thinks he's wrong. I have no idea what's right, what's wrong, honestly.
She says she's taking you to the hospital.
I know they put like 300 grand to dredge part of the lake.
Not my friend. So whatever.
So now
You're welcome to have a
I'm
seat, sir.
wondering how much to dredge all of it.
Right.
And how many
Exactly.
times is that to dredge? Because that sediment
Okay,
can be used
well,
for
you
other
got-
things.
The mayor, I think.
No,
Be
they
back
don't
in
give it
shortly.
away.
But
People
anyway,
use it for gardens and
we'll go ahead and get
landscaping.
started. My name is Brian Mitchell. I am the chair of the Water Ad Hoc Committee, and this meeting is an informal meeting to basically present options for the water. There's been several questions, been a couple options presented, and tonight we're going to be here to kind of get a synopsis of the two options that are currently prevalent and get a question and answer period going so everybody knows what's going on. With that, I will turn it over to the public works person. How are you?
I'm good, I guess.
Okay.
We'll just wait to hear what's gonna,
Okay.
this is just a question and answer period.
I guess, yeah, if we're gonna do that, then we may as well get started. I will take questions. Yes, ma'am.
I read all the city council minutes back to 2009, and there's nothing in there to indicate what the problem is. What's the problem?
As far as with water?
Yeah, there's
right.
nothing in there indicating that we have, why we even need a meeting like this, so I'm just curious. Is it, yeah, I've heard it's because we need to dredge the lake, I've heard it's because we need a new water plant, I've heard it's because we need both new plants, is it all three?
It's kind of a combination of things, but right now, the lakes have enough problems. Well, Lake 2, which is what we're currently drawing off now, it's kind of borderline of being the primary water source, simply because it has a slow return. It doesn't fill back up as quickly when we start to drain it. Lake 1 currently has a very bad silt problem. We are working on addressing it, but it is currently beyond our capabilities to drain water off there as a main water source and be able to meet our treatment requirements to make the water pass inspection. Does that answer your question?
Partially, what about the water plant and the water treatment plant? Do those need replaced?
Well, the water treatment plant is adequate for our needs at this time. It could definitely use some work. It's a very old building, but we were looking at other options as opposed to spending millions on the lake and millions on a water plant. We're trying to come up with other options that might be more feasible long-term. So that's basically what this committee was set up to do, to explore different options on a water source that would not be quite as costly as restoring the lakes for a water source and updating or replacing the water plant. Yes.
Can I ask that when members of the audience speak, they say who they are,
Oh, okay.
so I can quote accurately?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, my name is Ruth Kendall.
Thank you, Ruth.
Okay. Yes,
Ed Taylor, at the last council meeting I attended, you spoke about a commission that could find out some really germane information that would give us a better idea what's the status on the commission.
well, I'm not sure commission's the right word, but that's fine. But anyway, we're looking at a regional group to go through and come up with water. I prefer the term co-op because it would basically be different entities involved. As of now, we have 4 entities definitely involved in it, and that would mean a 4-member partnership. We would then be getting aquifer water from over in the Jerseyville area, and it would then come in, and it would be a separate entity, and the different 4 entities would then be water customers with that entity, but Carlinville would basically be an equal member of that co-op.
And we would then share the cost of a larger water plant if it's necessary.
Well, correct, but as far as a debt service for Carlinville itself, it would be minimal because the entity, the co-op, would actually take on the debt service. They would be the ones borrowing money, they'd be the ones doing the development, stuff like that. Carlinville's contribution would basically be our water customers. We would go through and have a master meter, each entity would have a master meter, and the water that passes through there, of course, then the city of Carlinville would pay for that based on their usage. And that would be Carlinville, each entity, that would be their contribution towards the expenses of the co-op.
And then what would happen to the current lakes? Would they just be recreational or?
Well, I'd like to, personally, as far as I'm concerned, best case scenario would be once we got this going and could actually do some more research and find out what could happen by approaching them as not using them as a primary water source, but using them as a recreational lake and as a possible backup. That would be, to me, best case scenario. We go through and find out about getting them cleaned up, getting them restored, use them for recreational lakes, and for me, it would be the backup in case we ever needed it for.
So we still have to rehab our old water plant to some extent, at least.
Correct.
Bring it in for a second.
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't have to do near as much, because if you're only gonna use it as a backup, and you don't have to have near the capacity or the, capacity, both volume and equipment to do it, if you're only using it like for an emergency or as a backup, where you're not relying on it every day.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
okay. I'm just going to interject here that some time ago, the council voted to do a study, and you could call it a feasibility study or whatever, and we were approved, I believe, for what, $30,000?
It's actually 40,
40.
but the city's portion is 10
Yes,
for the grant.
right, it's $40,000, $10,000 for the city, and then $30,000 is the grant amount. From that study, that is what has been going on, I believe, and I'm gonna turn this over to Max, because he's the one doing the study to let us know whether this is a feasible option for us to do. And,
The study was actually specific in the fact that it is for the regional concept. The study was for the regional concept, and that's what the study covered. Anything outside of that, the council in Carlinville hasn't approved any other further studies, any engineering fees, anything else to be done anywhere else to pursue any other options. That was the option that was put on the table.
for the $40,000?
Yes.
Okay,
But prior to that,
Yes.
we did have the engineering firm look at some other concepts.
And there's several options right there on the sheet that was
You took the best
existed from
concept.
the beginning.
And I think one thing we learned early on in the study, that someone may have use for later on, was if you put several entities together, there's some federal money available. If you go it alone, you're going to pay the fee, whatever it is, alone. So, and I have no idea what that fee is, so. That was up to Tim, I didn't get that.
can I go get the
Is
study?
that correct?
I'd like to let Max have just a few minutes to explain, just a quick overview from the start, what's got us to here, some of the feasibilities that we looked at, some of the debt services that was looked at early on, and actual documents that we have and have had that existed in Carlinville for studies on its lakes for several years. and what's been submitted to the EPA and some of our findings from the EPA up to this point. That may clear up a lot of questions. Would you be okay with that?
Sure. As has been discussed, there was an initial evaluation of a variety of options, including and starting with looking at the present status of the existing water treatment plant at the city lake. And there were some maintenance issues going on at that time. Since that time and during this process, there have been some component failures that have been pretty severe at the plant. And it's indicative of a plant that was built in the 1930s. So it's gotten a lot of mileage out of it, but there are problems there. So as we got into the study, we were able to convene a meeting with the major funding providers for rural water and infrastructure projects in the state of Illinois. We had Gary Bingenheimer from Illinois EPA SRF program was here. Dave McMillan was here as well from EPA. And there were representatives from United States Rural Development, and they were here to discuss their funding programs. And during that exchange of information, there was basically a sharing of philosophies from USDA that the perpetual use of lake supplies and the maintenance costs associated with that, they were not looking favorably on providing long-term funding for those type of supplies because of the continued maintenance. And so that played a factor in part of the future-looking feasible options. But as was discussed, what showed the most promise in terms of a long-term standalone, this was still just looking at Carlinville's options alone, was implementing a groundwater supply and then a dedicated main to move that water from the groundwater source to Carlinville. And the outcome of that showed that looked favorable in terms of cost comparisons against other new surface water plant construction or purchasing water from wholesale supplies. And part of the feedback during those group interactions was buying water from a third-party vendor relinquished a lot of control of the future rate increases and necessary maintenance that's associated with that wholesale provider. And there was some concerns as to going that route. But again, looking at the cost feasibilities that Tim had referenced, it wasn't a viable option in terms of cost per 1,000 gallons. And so at the conclusion of that process, the city of Carlinville was approached by a couple of rural water entities that were also expressing a need for looking at alternate water supplies. And so this concept was brought about of pooling resources. Is there a scale of economy that could be put into effect where everybody could share resources and perhaps reduce the individual's debt load for the new system? And that concept was discussed and brought forth to the United States Rural Development, and they in turn then funded the grant that you just heard about for doing the study of that regional concept. And that's really what the focus of that study was. And so there's an exhaustive effort of talking to the 4 participating entities, which Carlinville, City of Jerseyville, Jersey County Rural Water, and Fosterburg Water District. And from that, we're able to generate the reports that the mayor has in front of her and the executive summary. And so the culmination of that showed that at a 4-year design rate, that system would have to be able to provide a 10 million gallon per day supply to meet peak demand. And we looked at all the amenities to handle that full build out, which included a water tower and transmission main. The sizing for that transmission leaving the plant was looked at 8,600 gallons per minute. And after looking at that, we were able to develop a cost per 1,000 gallon and a total project cost. The total project cost is around $91 million. And that resulted in, without any loan or any grant assistance, a per 1,000 gallon cost of $4.83. If they're able to get a 25% grant, that brought it down to about $4 per 1,000. So we looked at what were some interim options to be able to get that system up and running and make the cost more viable on the startup. And so we were able to look at the initial growth and the current demand would require a 6 million gallon per day water treatment plant. And by working with cooperative agreements between the participating entities, we saw that we could eliminate the need immediately for a storage tank out in that system, which saved pretty significant costs as well. We did feel among the alternates on that reduced scale that we still needed to look at a full development pipe network. And so that resulted in what's referred to in the summary as an alternate 2B. And again, that got that rate down to $4 without any grant assistance. With 25% grant, that rate came down to $3.41. And with a 50% grant, if they were able to get that lucky, would be $2.75 per thousand. And so that was the conclusion of that process. We have submitted that to the state engineer with rural development for review comments. We do have those final comments that we're addressing. Basically looking at the supporting documentation that we have in the summary, that there are exhibit maps that show and are available for people to look at as to where the different entities would be connecting into the system and at the design criteria for the flow rates and pressures. So that's where we are today, is presenting that information to each of the 4 entities to determine their interest level, and from that feedback, the next step would be for representatives from each entity to start discussing the particulars of that organizational structure and how that entity can be pulled together. This is not a new concept. This has been a system that's been employed throughout the state and across the country of regionalization and pooling together of various water entities. There's a good article that was in the paper here recently documenting the status of the Gateway regional water system. It's been online for a little over 10 years, I believe. We've got some folks from Hennigan in the office that can talk specifics about that, but it's a very good model for what this concept looks like and how those multiple entities can work together and each have a voice in the direction for that regional system. So that's a real quick run through of where we are today and how we got there.
At the very beginning, it was asked about since 2009 in minutes. Maybe we can reflect back just real quick on the studies that were done by several state agencies and federal agencies that put them 2 documents together for Lake 1 and Lake 2, sustainability and the prediction of the silting issue that has been actually exceeded by several years now, because we have been able to use Lake 1 for 16 months, 17 months. So could you quickly go over that, and then we can do questions?
That report that Tim just talked about is a study of the health and the sustainability for the main lake, or Lake 1. And what it looked at was historical silt loadings, the anticipated progression of that silt buildup. The short story is that the Illinois State Water Survey concluded in that for a 50-year drought tolerance, that they didn't deem the lake as a viable long-term water source. And that was one of the statements made in their assessment. That synopsis was included in the report presented to the city. And as Tim mentioned, for several months now, that lake has been non-usable because of silt levels. The intake structure that was originally constructed in the lake consists of a tower near the dam out in the lake, and that tower has 3 holes in it. They're called ports. Each port has a valve, and they're at different elevations. The primary withdrawal port that is used to bring water into that structure is under the silt level now. In December, over a year ago, there was a significant rain event, and at the conclusion of that event, the city was no longer able to withdraw water. The silt level had increased to the point that it had blinded over that port. And so that left the city with only one option, is what they're doing today is using Lake 2, the smaller lake. The interesting thing about Lake 2 is it resides wholly within the watershed for Lake 1. And so when you look at recharge capacities during periods of low rainfall, it's a losing proposition because the city takes more water out of that lake than is recharged with normal rainfall. And so you've seen over the last several months decreasing lake level. I don't know if it's hit 3 feet down, but it was over 2 feet down.
It's almost 3 feet.
It was right, it was pushing 3 feet
It
over
was
time.
pushing. We're
So,
back up again.
We got a rainfall to help mitigate that, but it's an ongoing problem, and it's simply a function of surface area versus the watershed that drains into that lake. There's just not enough capture area to keep the lake full with that type of daily demand that's being extracted out of it. We get into the heat of the summer, that's gonna get worse just because of evaporation and wind action. So what the city is doing in the interim, to be able to mitigate that and to make sure they've got a viable water supply, is they are working on a program to retrofit the old Lake 1 intake tower to put a variable level intake on that lowest port and connect that with an umbilical piece of tubing that will allow the operator to move that draw point out of that lake up and down. The other benefit short term that's going to have is it's going to improve the water quality coming into the treatment plant because of the fact it was acting like a vacuum cleaner pulling silts and sediments off the bottom of the lake. You can imagine the quality of the water that's coming into the water plant. So it was quite a burden for the operators to contend with before it blinded over. So we're trying to improve that. And again, that tower and the condition of the concrete is not ideal. There's several rungs broken off on the ladder, and it's an accessibility issue. So it's not a long-term fix, but we're hoping that it's going to buy several years worth of extended life to be able to continue to utilize Lake 1 as a second source.
And we have now contracted out, or we're looking to contract
Procuring
out.
bids right now.
The contracts are out now?
Yeah,
We're
we're getting
doing that.
proposals back in
Yeah,
right
we're
now.
waiting for the proposals are coming back in. That includes what, divers that will have to go in and clean it all out and whatever. It'll be quite a process. I
And
don't
it
know.
is, it's specialty construction, so it's not like we can
Yeah.
go to the local hall and
Now,
find somebody to do it with.
from my perspective on the council, and I've learned a lot from Max, I've been on all meetings with Max and hearing stuff, it's a wealth of knowledge, and I've learned a lot. My thing is, it's a viable water source coming from Jerseyville as a source, but it's 45 miles from Carlinville. It's a 36-inch line through Jerseyville, goes down to a 30-inch line to Shipman, and goes out to two 18-inch lines, one to Frostburg, one to Carlinville. It comes up the Shipman Blacktop. Carlinville has no growth potential down the Shipman Blacktop for economic growth, if you're thinking down the road for economic growth. And I voiced this with Max, I said, our growth potential is out 108 or up Route 4 to Otter Lake. If we had the lines going there, that allows businesses, because a business always looks at what infrastructure is already in place. So they don't have to build it when they come to a town. They say, oh, I gotta bring water mains in, I gotta bring power and all this. If it's already there, they capitalize on the investments that the city's already made. So my point is, this is a viable source maybe for Jerseyville, because Jerseyville's got a 36-inch line going through Jerseyville, and already Shipman's a 30-inch line. But to Fosterburg, which Fosterburg and Jerseyville are on American water, they already have a source of water. So this would be a secondary source for them, and Jerseyville would get the brand new plant 12 miles from their plant with a 36-inch line. It just does not seem feasible for Carlinville when we have other options on the table for us. One of them being Litchfield. I went over to Litchfield and met with Steve, the mayor, and I'll let Steve and his people talk to you guys in a second, but they have a $4 million, in 2009, they built a brand new plant, and it's capable of processing 4 million gallons of water a day. Currently, it runs at about 28% capacity. So they have the capacity to supply us the water. They just got an easement that went under the 55 from the state, so now they're on the west side of the interstate.
By the end of the year, we'll be all the way to the county line road.
County Line Road. So they're there, all we have to do is tap onto there and run the line to Carlinville.
How big a line is that?
Whatever you want, whatever, I mean, that's your choice. We can run, you know, an 8-inch if that's what you're needing, or a larger.
And if you look at the numbers that they were shooting out earlier, with no federal funding, you got down to 405. With 60% federal funding, you got down to 275. Steve, will you say what your rates are right now?
We supply 4 other districts right now. We're gonna add a 5th one with Cahokia soon. And I just looked at the rates on the way over here. We're already to your low end with 6.5 million gallons usage a month. And you're talking about 28,000, or 28 million, excuse me.
Steve, would you identify yourself so
I'm
that
sorry.
not everyone knows that
Okay,
you're...
I'm Steve Gordy, I'm mayor of Litchfield. With me tonight, I have Ted LaBelle, who's our engineer, and he actually built the plant in 2009, and it's a state-of-the-art plant. Your mayor has been there, Randy has been there, along with other groups. From what I thought, they were very impressed with the pictures, and we have Alderman Dave Hollow here also is our liaison to the water department, and Ray Weller, who's been with the city of Litchfield and the water department for 42 years. He has 5 employees that average about 30 years experience. We have as I said, a state-of-the-art plant that has a membrane system that, Ray, would you explain what that membrane system does?
Yeah, Ray Weller. The membrane system is a filtering system that filters particles out of water that are anything larger than 0.1 micron. To give you an idea of how small a particle that would be, a human hair follicle is 60 microns in diameter. So this removes everything all the way down to 0.1. It removes 99.99% of viruses and germs. And we actually have customers that we're supplying water to now that it's a declining rate scale. The declining rate gets them down under the $2.73 that you were even mentioning previously.
And we're talking about a 15-mile line. I've read in the Inquirer Democrat 2 or 3 times that Litchfield has been contacted and we're either not interested or not capable, and there's nothing further from the truth than that. I don't know where that's coming from. If it does come from one of our employees, we're gonna have a talk, but that's not the truth. We're more than capable of handling that volume. Even adding Carlinville's needs, we wouldn't be near 50%. And as far as the capacity of the lake, Ted, could you speak to that too? I think, what would a 1-inch rain get us today? How many days supply of water?
I think the Lake Yeager is a very large water supply. We did a calculation that the entire volume that the city of Litchfield uses off Lake Yeager is the top 10 inches of water. And obviously that's replenished year round, so there's more than ample capacity.
What will we waste in our spillway today?
Yeah, 1 inch of runoff in the watershed of Lake Yeager adds about 5 feet of water to Lake Yeager. So if you figure average rainfall is 36 inches a year, if you got 18 inches of runoff, you know, you get 100 feet of water. So there's plenty, very large watershed relative to the lake size of Lake Yeager. So there's ample capacity in the lake to add customers. And right now the plant has a capacity of 4 million gallons per day. And they have Lake Yeager as their primary water supply. And then they've got Litchfield Lake as a backup water supply. So they even have some duplication in their source.
And your other lake is 40 foot deep, your old lake?
Correct.
Right.
And you said that you would have water to the County Line Road, or you have infrastructure to that point.
We will have water to County Line Road. We're currently looking at any possibility of grants, but with or without them, we're already committed to the project. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. If there is grant money, we don't want to spend it first. So we're doing due diligence on that, and very shortly we're going to move ahead on our own. We've already determined that it's going to be we're crossing the interstate because we're adding another industrial park, a third industrial park, because we've outgrown the other two. And so that's gonna fill that need also. So we're determined to get that done whether Carlinville comes on or not, it's gonna be there.
Are you adding a wastewater plant over there?
Adding a wastewater?
Yeah, are you adding a plant over there or
No.
anything, no?
Well, we'll be moving wastewater to our plant from the west side.
Okay, got it, okay, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir?
Chad Rice, just a citizen here in town. I got a question. You know, you're talking about the 4 regionalization zones. You're talking about Jerseyville, the rural water districts and whatever. The gentleman here talking about the treatment plants, you know, over there that they got and the capacity that they have. You know, I don't hear anybody talking about that as a viable option, that they've talked about cost. Now, maybe I missed it and I don't read the paper a lot of times because they don't know how to type and stuff like that. So it ain't worth my time to read the negative stuff. But anyway, are we looking at costs there? Because that's the closest option. They got capacity. He's shaking his head no. Why are we not? I mean, nothing against the other folks, but we need to be looking at costs. We're talking in the tune of millions, and we're closer and they got the capacity, and they can bring our costs down, and they know they have the treatment. They got modern technology that was put in 2009, and we got a treatment plant put in the 1930s that at some point is going to be replaced or back up, whatever we're going to ultimately decide is that, you know. Why are we not looking at that as an option?
We're not looking. In fact, that's one of the reasons for here tonight, why they're here, so we can get.
Is that a part of this study, or is this not something else?
No, this study was strictly for the regional, because that's what the grant money was for.
Okay, so this would just be a hook on to Litchfield, potentially, if we looked at
It
that
would
as an
be
option.
strictly water customers, and we'd be hooked on to we'd be an extension of their water system.
Yeah, I
I
assume
know
that's,
the concern is.
I just want to make sure I'm just asking the question. Are we looking at that? Are we planning to look at that? Because we're looking at the feasibility of doing the regionalization with 4 other communities from quite a ways with potential drop in pressure. He's talking about the economical scale. So Litchfield's growing leaps and bounds, maybe for other reasons. They're close to interstate and stuff like that we won't go into, but they got a brand new plant for all those purposes. Why are we not looking at it? And I'm guessing we're going to.
Well, that's one of the reasons
That's
we
why
went
they're
out to these
here too,
meetings,
I
because
presume.
this option was presented. It wasn't explored a whole lot before, because we were more interested in being a partner with some sort of water system and not just a water customer, if that answers your question.
Yep. I'm just thinking via the cost.
Well,
City of
that's one of the
Carlinville's got a lot of
things we're
costs
still
more
trying to
than
find out,
just
is the cost
water,
of
but, you know.
doing this. Yes?
My name's Sarah Oswald, I'm an alderman, and when this first came up, the council kind of determined whether we wanted to be a customer or whether we wanted to keep control over the rates of the water, what was gonna happen with the water. And this was probably 4 years ago when I first came on the council. So you have to decide what you wanna be, and so as we were deciding this, the council at that time decided we just don't really wanna be a customer, because then you have no control. And if Litchfield, and I'm not saying they're gonna do this, but if something happens or they decide that they just gonna raise our water rates, we have nothing to say about it. And that's the part that the council had thought at that time might not be a good idea. Whether it's right or wrong or indifferent, that's what the council at the time decided, that they preferred to have control over our water, which we have had from the beginning of time, rather than to give up that control. I'm not saying it won't change, and I'm not saying, this is the first time I've heard the Litchfield part, and I think it's very interesting too. And I haven't closed my mind to it, and I haven't decided, oh no, we're going this route. I agree, we all need to look at all the options. It does worry me a little bit to just give up all our water and say, okay, we're gonna buy water now. That, for me, is a little bit of a problem.
Well, present agreements are negotiated and agreed to, and the only increases that are given is if we pass on a 2% increase to our residents, it goes onto those also, onto the wholesale prices.
When I met with Steve in Litchfield, my proposal is, I don't know how many people know about the algae bloom down at the Gulf of Mexico. You know, it's about 5,500 square miles of dead coral reef and all that. It's all the runoff from the rivers going down. Well, that's what our 319 grants have been done, that we've been doing. I think Bob's in the audience, speak more to that. about fixing the silt going into our existing lake. And we have all the runoff going into our lake and that silt, so we still got that issue to resolve. The government's been putting money into this project to stop the runoff. So I'm thinking, well, if you could take our lake offline, get your water off Litchfield for 5 years, drain our Lake 1, we still got Lake 2 to our water plant for a backup. We drain Lake 1, we dig it down, it's got atrazine in the bottom, we had an atrazine settlement before I was even on the council. You apply some of that money, burn the dirt, stockpile that dirt off the side, dig the lake back down to its original size, bring our lake back online with Lake 2. We always have the Litchfield water as a backup. And then we determined at that point, is it more feasible for us to run our water or to buy our water?
Our water is already over to Timber Estates through the Henderson.
Through the Henderson, but the Henderson's not capable of running
No,
through the existing line.
You need a dedicated line for.
Right, and that's why I'd like to run a full line straight from Litchfield, bypass Henderson, straight to our water plant. And then we determine by the valve, do we run off Litchfield water? If Lake 2 is running down too low, we run Litchfield water. If Lake 2 filled up, we run our Lake 2 water. I mean, and I have to talk to Max if this is all feasible from the EPA and stuff. But that, I'm trying to combine as many entities that we have going wrong. We have the algae bloom problem. We have a Lake 1 that's got, what is it, 14 feet at our dam? Or down by the water tank. So this thing that we're putting in there only has 14 feet of water to draw from. So you got 60 from the bottom getting the algae and you get the top. You only have a little bitty area that you can pull clean water out of. And you can't get any more than 14 feet because it's full of silt. So Lake 1's almost non-existent anymore. I mean, we're beyond critical at this stage as far as what we got to make a decision.
Steve, did you tell me when we talked last week, and I think I heard it before, that for us to hook onto Henderson is a 10% increase for us?
That would be something you'd have to do.
That
with
we'd have to
Henderson.
work out
Yeah.
with Henderson.
And Henderson's lines would be able to fill your north tower very easily, I believe.
Yes.
Because how many feet away is it from?
It's like 350 feet from our
Yeah,
tower going right down the road.
Henderson goes that close to that north tower. That would be a stopgap if you did have a real problem.
Okay. Where's Bob Vance up there too? I was gonna ask.
Mayor,
Sorry, go ahead.
the other mayor, you've given us a lot of information that I greatly appreciate. And I'll agree with you, we're at the critical stage. But if we're gonna have to quit running around in circles like a dog chasing his tail. We've got one report. If we wanna look at the Litchfield thing for feasibility, I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with, our lake's kaput. You can say, well, we're gonna go to Litchfield for 5 years, we're gonna dig it out. I don't know where all that money's gonna come from. First, you gotta run a line from over here, probably, you're not gonna dig a line to Carlinville, I'm sure.
We're gonna go to the county line road.
Yeah, then we gotta go out with the 10 miles, that's no big deal. But you're not gonna get any grants for the little lake, we've been told. So why would we spend money unless we had a good water supply, pure water at a reasonable rate from Litchfield? Our increases would be the same as their increases, if you have to 2%.
I would think you'd have a good margin for maintenance of your own infrastructure.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to fool with that old lake, we just spending more bad money after good.
But we still have to fix the phosphorus going off and all that, we still gotta do
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, we gotta do something with it, but
So we have to, so if we dig it down, we capture all it. I think our rate right now is 383 per thousand. I think our rate right now is 383 per thousand. If we could get it from them for 273, there's $1. A 1,000,000 gallon usage a day divided by 1,000, you can fill 1,000 gallons a day. So if you had $1 upcharge, it's $1,000 a day. That's $365,000 a year if you do it every day. $313,000 if you take out the weekends. So you could average about $340,000 a year that we could pocket. Take that times 5 years, that's $1,700,000 we could apply to run the line from Litchfield over to us.
Well, we could do that, but what are we gonna do with the old lake?
I'm saying that the thing about doing the old lake, if we drain the lake and we start digging it out, we utilize local people, local contractors, and all that, utilizing their rigs and their trucks and all that, we put money back into this area. And we fix the phosphorus problem and the atrazine problem that we're doing. We spent $1 million on the 319 grant.
You know what, and I can't answer this, Tim, you might be able to. But no matter how deep we dig it, we've still got a small lake. And we're still going to get chemicals from agriculture. And they're not gonna quit using the chemicals. You know, that's part of the reason that the EPA won't fund these, if I'm correct. And I think what we've got to focus on is getting a reliable supply of drinkable, potable, good water at the most reasonable price we can get it. We have a lot of people that are retired in town, we got a lot of people that are raising families, we got businesses that need water at a reasonable rate. We got a hospital out here that needs a supply of water. And I think our goal, and I agree with you, it's critical. I mean, this thing's gonna go kaput. If you have a dry year like 54, you really kaput. So I think we proceed with all haste, but I think we focus on getting a supply of good drinkable water, and then worry what we do with the frog pond out here.
And I agree with Dick, and I like that idea because our best source of water is Litchfield.
Well, and I want to address the potential price increases. We have not levied for a tax increase in Litchfield now for 5 years in property taxes. The only time we raise any rates is when it's mandated. Deanna, I don't know if you were a member of the legislature at the time, but the state legislature mandates that your enterprise funds, your water and your sewer, have to be self-supporting. And that's the only time we raise rates, is to match that, to deal with the legislature and the actual rules.
My question is for Steve, do you negotiate with your satellites as a whole or individual?
Individual.
Okay.
But they're all, I mean, if you look at them, they're all very close, so, you know, each one plays into the other, let's put it that way. But there would be a difference with Carlinville, because you would immediately be a larger user than what these smaller customers are.
What's the debt service going to be for getting from County Line Road into Carlinville?
I don't know, that's for engineers.
That's where
Nobody knows.
That's where I said that 1,700,000 we've got just by taking our current rate, saving the money that we're getting a lower rate
Yeah, you
on.
can get a low interest loan.
We got 1,700,000 right there. We can go to the bank and say, hey, we got 1,700,000 right here to run this 18-inch line or whatever we need from Litchfield over to here. You guys think about it. We're paying, actually, we're not paying $383 per thousand in that study. Is that what Carlinville rate was?
Mayor, help.
$383 per thousand, okay, and you go down to 270, there's $1 right there, so that's $340,000 a year easily, that you're gonna save, 365 to 313. On 9.5, it's $1,700,000 that you can apply as this project.
Every 1,000 gallons we purchase from them is at $270 from start to finish?
That's Steve. Steve?
Every 1,000 gallons from number one all the way through to what we need per month.
That's not the current rate structure, but we would skip.
I do know what the current rate structure is for some of the satellites, and I'd like to know if that's what Carlinville's is, because
Absolutely
their numbers are very skewed.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, you would skip those top tiers and get down to
No, that's not.
What I'm looking at, Tim,
But to
we're
not
at
ask-
383, if we can get it for 283, that's $1, that's savings
Everything's
right there.
skeptical, we don't know that, it's not been looked at. It needs to be looked at,
Yeah, me-
but today, we haven't looked at it,
What,
so.
Steve, do you not sell that one, that K customer for like $290, and that your rate right now?
I'm sorry.
That one group you're selling at $290 per thousand?
The highest volume ones are at 292, is 290, you're right.
$290.
Yeah, but again, they're at, that's at.
At $500,000.
That's at 6.5 million gallons per month. And you're gonna be at
At $1 million
very close.
per day.
Per day, I'm sorry, yeah.
$1 million per day.
Yeah.
So if we could get down to the 283,
So
that's
you'd be at
$1
like-
savings
you'd
right
be
there,
at
that's that money
28 or
you're talking
30
about.
28 or 30 million, as opposed to the 6.5 million
Right.
that we have on these smaller.
So I'm sure we could get a really decent rate from you guys.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I heard you say it, you said that you are at 50%, or Carlinville would put you at 50%.
Carlinville would put us at less than 50%.
Less than 50%.
So we're talking, right now, we're producing a million one? 1112 per day, and our capacity is 4 million.
I just want to make sure I had that clarified in my mind.
So we would be at right near 50%, I would say.
Well, I know you're not going to oversell your lake.
No, I mean, we're never gonna run out of water, but we do have to, we may have to put in another membrane bank too, which is gonna cost us, what, $1 million?
between 8:30 and 9.
Okay. Yes, sir?
You've got, Litchfield, you guys, you know, we've got the other people, I guess, or somebody, or at least you guys are speaking on behalf of whatever the other 4 groups with your study. What's the total cost? Have you looked at the total cost bringing it from Shipman to here? How long's the contract? I mean, if you're gonna own and operate this thing completely, what's the total cost gonna be and how long is it viable for? I have to know most treatment plants on average 20 years. How long would our contract with you guys would it be negotiated for? Or do you do a 40, a 50 year or longer, or do you just do them, how's your contract
We're gonna
structured?
be to the county line road. The expense stops for us at that point, unless we have to have a membrane system. Am I wrong? We're gonna be at the county line road anyway.
Right,
The expense stops for us there,
right.
unless we have to add a membrane system. So the only longer term, or the term we would be concerned with is, being able to pay off that membrane system, but that's only $500,000 or less. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I'm just thinking the viability of cost. I'm looking at cost.
Well,
Carnival's got a cost problem
the
with a lot of
cost
stuff,
would
but we're
be
talking
from-
strictly water. The
the
cost
would be from
savings
County
right
Line
now,
Road to
hooking
wherever-
up, I heard you, Sarah, talking about Carlinville had discussed this with the potential that they wanted to have all control. We gotta think about not the control, but think about the customer, the cost, the long-term viability of having a system that's in place before it crumbles. You know, you already got people fearing drinking the water. You know, you're talking about possibly keeping the water online or using it as a backup, which scares the heck out of me. I don't know about other people. If you already got atrazine in the water and you got silt and you want to dig it deep, whatever, all that other stuff was discussed, I think your only option is to regionalize or go with somebody else. You want to build a new treatment plant, several $1 million, and, you know, I mean, there's a lot of cost online. You know, you're talking long-term length. Okay, if we bring it to the county line, that's fine. You know, for your cost, how often do you negotiate the contract? How long are your rates, say 5 years, 10 years, or do you just do them every few years when you have cost of living increases, or?
Usually if there's any kind of federal money involved, which in this case, to build a line between the 2 communities, there probably would be some federal money involved. They like to see a long-term contract, generally like maybe 40 years.
Okay, so I'm just saying there, build a treatment plant, look at that option. If you're looking at regionalization, building a treatment plant, which you got the cost to build it, operate it and maintain it, then you're gonna look again in 20 years or less, depending on pumps and some other replacement parts and all that stuff, at another cost of either replacing your plant, you know, or, you know, I mean, I don't know what they got built out in Jerseyville, wherever this is all gonna come from, through American Water, but of all the cost in your study, I assume Max, not Max, what's your Max? Have been looked at least with that study. I'm just saying we need to look the other direction, look at cost versus time. And then look at all the volumes. Can they handle the capacity? Yes. Can they handle the cost right now? Yes. How long would it take to get up to the cost that you say per 1,000 gallons would cost you through regionalization? And then we got viable water system, at least with Litchfield. I don't know the others. At least with Litchfield, that, you know, we know they can handle the capacity, volume. They've got a replenished water supply, which we don't have, if we talk about keeping ours. You know, so I mean, when you're looking at cost, rates, and all that stuff, yeah, people are gonna throw a fit when you raise water rates. Well, you know, you gotta do something here, so we know that's not up for debate. What's gonna be cheapest, long-term, that's gonna get us a viable water supply? And over the economical span of it, I agree with, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I agree with at least that portion of it. We're bringing in a smaller line down a road where nobody wants to connect, in a town that's already losing a lot of stuff already from an economical standpoint. If you don't have infrastructure in place, no matter where you get it from, it'd be better, I think, to have a cost that's cheaper to a community that's closer, to have a connection economically that might be better. That's just
Something from a perception standpoint that's important to make clear is regardless of what water provider Carlinville winds up with, even if it's still doing your own at the lake, is the delivery mechanism that's been looked at is 2,000 gallon a minute or better, which is well exceeds what your present delivery system can handle. And so we fully recommend that you look long-term at what the growth potential for Carlinville is and not have your transmission name be the limiting factor on that. And so when we put together the numbers, we had to look at population trends, what the demographic for Carlinville was doing, and what the potential was. so that there was adequate infrastructure in place to be able to accommodate that and not have that be the deal breaker for a business exit, but for that infrastructure would have located in Carlinville. So, again, that may or may not be out in the public, but that understanding needs to be there, that whatever the geography is around that water source, the delivery mechanism has to have that long-term capacity. As far as you mentioned before about the debt service, the 20-year life is, I think, unreasonable. We typically look at least at a 40-year life on plan. Now, it's not to say equipment doesn't wear out. You just heard Litchfield's gonna have to upgrade their system already. So,
Only if we have to increase the capacity.
so you've got capital costs, pumps wear out, chemical feed changes. One of the other things we haven't talked a lot about is the source water and the inherent differences in groundwater versus surface water. There are additional testing constraints on surface water that Carlinville needs to be aware of. If they're presently under those constraints now, they would, under the circumstance with Litchfield, would be under the same type of subordinate testing requirements for disinfection byproducts. That's not a liability that's passed off to the wholesale provider only. And so those things need to be looked at. It may not be a deal breaker, but it certainly will be an impact on the day-to-day operations for the facility.
Actually, that's not quite true. Litchfield is surface water just like Carlinville. What you're talking about with the Jerseyville regionalization would be groundwater supply, new well water coming from an aquifer. I'm not sure, isn't that what Flint, Michigan did? They switched sources, and that's what caused a lot of the problems that they had. With Litchfield, you'd be getting surface water just like Carlinville produces now.
Like I just said.
As a water customer of the city of Litchfield, if I was a customer of Carlinville, what scares me is on the regionalization facility, some of my numbers may be fuzzy, but I think it started out around a $58 million project, and then it got in the 70s and the 80s, and now I'm hearing a $91 million project, and you haven't signed any papers yet. It's not completely ready to go. Now, the debt service is not going to be handled by Carlinville, it's going to be handled by a co-op. So you lose all control there. Not only is the co-op going to have to recoup enough money to pay back the debt service, they have operational costs. They're going to have to show a profit because they're going to have to maintain their equipment, their personnel. They've got a lot of operational costs. I would be interested if somebody from Michigan knows what the debt service was for the Gateway project and what they wholesale their water to their customers for. Anybody knows that offhand?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Bob Mans with Hennigan
Bob, would you
Associates.
stand, please?
Sure. Bob Mans with Hennigan Associates. I wasn't involved with all the Gateway startup and everything, but when their initial cost was $340 per thousand, and they held that rate for 8 years straight, and they're now at $355 per thousand.
And the debt service was how much, though? It's not near 91 million, was it?
The total project for Gateway?
Yes.
It was around 20-25 million range off the top of my head.
That was how long ago?
Yeah, it's been 10 years ago.
10, 15 years
And
ago?
it's a smaller plant.
It's a small plant.
It's like a 3.4 MGD plant.
With Litchfield, we have everything in place. For me to go from 1 million gallon a day to 2 million gallon a day, it's only gonna cost me a little bit of operational cost, a little more energy, a little more chemicals. We've got the plant, personnel, the supply, everything is there.
My question, you said you're going to the county line. Is that where the meter would be at if we ran the line from there to Carlinville?
I think that's something you'd have to think about.
I'm just saying, if you guys are doing an expansion on that side with Industrial Park, if it came on down to us, I mean, if the meter was there, they'd actually be our customers from that line on down prior to Carlinville.
Oh, no, the meter would just meter whatever would go past that.
But I'm saying, you put the meter at the county line.
Oh, yeah.
So if you continue to grow on the west side, those customers would then be Carlinville customers too then, I mean, right? I mean,
Oh, you mean on the west side of, no.
Depends on where the park is.
are you putting the
We're
meter at the
talking
county
about-
line? or-
We're talking about a dedicated line for Carlinville. We'll have another
Oh.
line for the industrial park.
Well, I'm just saying, when you go to the county line, that road, that line is to us, right?
Yes.
And that, I'm just saying that, so the county line, if we put a meter there,
We're going to go there regardless. But if Carlinville wants a dedicated line, then we'll have to, we would, that would be honest.
And that's what I would be better than fine.
Yes.
You charge for the water that went through Carlinville.
so if Carnival had an upcharge to maintain its lines in town like it does now, with that, what I'm saying, could we meter those customers?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm saying, so from the county line, that, from anything past that point would be considered our customers
On that line.
on that
yes.
line, and if you
Yes.
guys screw your park over that direction, but after that line, if we tapped onto that line, and anybody in that area, we'd be billing those customers.
I think you find out Henderson's already got them all.
No, I'm just saying, as they grow the industrial park that way, they're putting in a whole new industrial park.
And that's theirs, they're probably just west of town, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Across the highway.
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned bringing on Lake Cahoe, that's farther to the south, would they be tapping on at the same place? There at County Line Road? Because you only have the one other easement, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so they'd be tapping on there as well? Okay,
yes.
thank you.
But didn't you say, Steve, what size, you gonna run one line or two lines underneath the interstate?
That's up for negotiation at this point.
So he might run two 30-inch lines underneath
No,
there.
that's what I'm asking, you know,
Right.
kind of.
And it's what he said in my initial meeting, that he might run two
Well,
rather than
We
just
have
one.
2 lines planned at this point.
Okay, so two lines.
Okay.
They've already been budgeted.
Bob gave me. I just had a quick question about the capacity of Lake Louis. Say it quit raining today and the city of Carlinville was on, the line as well. You're producing 2 million gallons of water per day, half capacity roughly. How many days could you go if it didn't rain? Like 2012, we went, 90 days or 120 days without a rainfall event. You said you were taking 10 inches off the lake, as your average. Daily, so I was just trying to get an idea.
That's 10 inches per year.
Per year, okay.
Our rule of thumb has always been, we were told that the lake would handle a 7-year drought.
216.
We did do back in 2006, we did a 100-year drought analysis for Lake Yeager, how much water they could pull off during a 18-month or 30-month drought. And I don't have the numbers right at the top of my head, but it was well in excess of the capacity of the water plant.
Every year we draw the lake down 4 feet, and that's basically almost 5 years supply, isn't it? 5 years supply for what we need.
It refills every spring without a problem.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it quit raining, how many days? I didn't know the capacity now, so that's what I was.
Yeah, one rain like today would probably bring it up almost the 4 feet that we took it down.
And I thought you said 10 inches per day, but per year, that's a totally different story.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to address the master meter question again. The master meter would be put on where Carlinville makes the connection. But one thing you have to realize is that the transmission main would be inside Henderson's Water District. Now, they preliminarily agreed to allow this to happen, provided there's no other tap-ons within their water district on that
Okay.
main.
That's good to
They
know.
don't want you stealing customers that
Right.
are potentially their customers.
Right.
So, yeah, wouldn't be able to tap on.
Okay.
Bill Heider's my name. Bob brought up a question for you guys. I've got a question for Max. It came to mind when he asked about the surface water. I don't recall seeing anything about the longevity of the aquifers. You're drawing water, talking about drawing water out of Jerseyville. You've got sinkholes in Florida, all over the country, it's happening. The more you draw off the aquifers, the more damage you're gonna do. What kind of lifespan do you have? Is there any estimate of how long this aquifer would last?
Fabulous question, thank you. And there's a wealth of information through the Illinois State Water Survey that's public domain. So you can go online and literally look up well logs and production records for every inventoried well in the state of Illinois. And that is a great planning tool when you're trying to address concerns and questions like that. One of the real limiting factors for this study, ideally, when we started looking at this, our hope was to be able to find an aquifer within 10 miles of Carlinville that would be able to produce groundwater. It's not there. And so that really focused the research to where the water was. And to your point, how long is that viable? As far as sinkholes, that's typically a karst topography issue related to soluble limestone. We're not seeing that in the Illinois alluvium. And what you've got in a groundwater source that's alluvial is it's essentially a sand reservoir, if you will. Think of it as an underground river. So there's pluses and minuses. The plus is that lens, if you will, of sand is a storage medium. Think of it as a large tank. Its recharge is the watershed that essentially replenishes that Illinois basin. The downsides are the water quality. Ideally, we're dealing with several of our clients in the Mississippi bottoms that have very little soluble metals in the water, irons and manganeses, which is ideal. It's not the case here. And so the Jerseyville water supplies that exist today uses lime as a additive to try to help pull those metals out. They aerate to oxidize the metals, and so they have to treat for that to get the iron and the manganese out. And that's would be expected for the water quality there. And so that's been factored into the projections for treatment. As far as longevity, those wells require maintenance. They do have the potential for iron fouling that has to be treated periodically. And so as we look at an operational budget, we have to factor in what are the annual costs anticipated to do perpetual maintenance on every component, including the wells. And so good well health, and we're blessed with good technology today to be able to monitor, just like you go to the doctor and get your blood pressure taken, we're able to look at recovery rates for wells. We can trend that now. So when we're looking at how long it takes a well from when it's shut off to recapture its original static water level, that's a barometer. That's telling us how much resistivity is incurred in that gravel pack that is restricting the flow. And that's a symptom of is that gravel pack starting to foul or get iron growth on it. Now we're able to set benchmarks, and if we see a threshold being exceeded, we start to do a maintenance procedure. So we're proactive, and we can prolong that life and not have to react that operator comes in one day and flips on the pump and now he's got white water coming out. It's too late. You've lost the capacity for the well. And so that's how we're looking at groundwater systems now, is we're putting in preemptive measures so the operator has the best data in front of them to be able to do preventive maintenance and to stay on top of any potential problems. We're also able to track pump performance so we can see if they're starting to get wear on the pumps. And again, be proactive in terms of doing a maintenance routine to either chemically treat or to pull the pump and do a maintenance on the pump so that the efficiencies aren't lost. But we don't anticipate with the area and the amount of real estate, if you look at those recharge maps that the State Water Survey has available, it's a phenomenal resource. It's where you're seeing a lot of the landowners that are putting in center pivot irrigation, is because there is just an abundant supply of water. And again, it's important to note, it doesn't come without a price. There is the quality issue that has to be treated. And so again, that was part of the driving factors in looking at what type of treatment. Initially, when we were looking at a Carlinville only system, what we had projected was more of a operation-free type of system that uses pressure vessels, manganese green sand, to try to pull the iron out. And so that there's less hands-on. But the concern we had was the softening aspect, and if we used an ion exchange type softening, there was a potential fear of compatibility of water when it came to the end user. Carlinville's current system is used to a lime softened water. And so as this regional supply has developed, we're looking at replicating what Jerseyville does, which is the lime softening type plant. It's just on a larger scale. But we have a very good benchmark and a tremendous amount of data in the historical water quality that Jerseyville has experienced. So we feel like we've got a comfortable baseline to put those numbers together.
So
the short answer is we don't foresee an end wall or a limitation of that year X. This supply is going to run out.
Okay.
Yes.
Being from Gillespie, mine subsidence is a big thing, you know, especially if you're Benel, because they've lost countless water lines. You know, speaking toward the aquifer, you're right there near the river. What is the likelihood of cross-contamination there? given any sort of catastrophic event, we
Sure.
are on a fault in this area, and there's mines everywhere, and Dick can obviously speak to that. But how does that fit in with the aquifer scenario?
One of the things that the Illinois state, or Illinois EPA looks at is the aquifer confined? And that basically means, is there an adequate soil cap on that to prevent the inclusion of surface contamination and fouling? And so that's, when we're looking at desirable well fields, a well field that's utilizing 50-foot deep wells is more prone to or vulnerable to surface inclusions. What we're looking at here are wells that are in the 90-plus foot deep range with an adequate soil cap on them. So in terms of influence from surface activities or geologic events, historically we're not seeing that.
The mines around here, the coal mines around here are 300, 350 foot mines. That's below the aquifer. Would a subsidence event, if there are mines in that area, affect the aquifer?
I'm not aware of any history that would reflect that. And what I would say is, in that type of event, you're looking at some catastrophic that is beyond the scope of just the supply, the impact of.
Thing is,
such
it's
an
happened
event.
here. That's the
Right.
problem. We've lost a 7-year-old elementary school to mine subsidence 12 miles from
On
here.
subsidence, on subsidence, to
Okay.
simplify it, if you had a well in your yard, okay, and we'll use Monterey as an example because they had land subsidence and they sent 1,000 feet, 5 feet, and fell around. What happens, it gives kind of like a rubber band and it cracks the rock, okay? So your well might go dry real quick, but when it came back, it almost always comes back stronger because you crack the rock with the subsidence and you let more water flow through it.
Yeah, but how long does it take it to come back?
Oh, I think probably we had it from 3 days to about 5. It comes back pretty quick.
Okay.
And the subsidence then continues on until it's complete, and it forms its own streams.
Thank you.
Usually that will enhance. Now, what an earthquake can do to it, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that.
There's been no coal mining from the Nutwood bottom where the Jerseyville plant is for the entire routing all the way to the city of Jerseyville.
Okay, great. I wasn't aware. There was just a.
Bob, did you want to elaborate on the Jerseyville plant and the Jerseyville issue? Anything you wanted to say?
On the city of Jerseyville?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mayor Russell couldn't be here tonight. He's been very active and cooperative with Mayor Mugio throughout the process. They're facing very similar issues to Carlinville and a lot of people in the region, so what I'm allowed to say on their behalf probably is that they're looking at 3 options right now, not unlike Carlinville. One option would be they're looking at rehabbing their plant just to take care of their own situation. They're looking strongly at this regional option. And then they also have a third party, as shown Greg Henderson, purchasing their assets, so a little bit different angle than here, but that's kind of where they're at today.
I have a question for Litchfield. You said that going through Henderson, there was an agreement we couldn't do any of the water. Have we talked to Henderson about the easements? Can we come through on their existing easements anyway?
I've not had personal contact, but I know some of the engineers have.
Yeah, I mean, how close would that get us to Carlinville following Henderson's existing easements, if that was an option?
Yeah, now that I can't answer. This is all very, very preliminary. But the mayor asked me to take a look at this, and we've come up with actually several different options. There's a short-term option where Carlinville just wanted to purchase water for up 5 years or less. There's a couple upgrades that Henderson is willing to do to their water district, some water main upgrades that would allow Henderson to supply water to Carlinville. He would be a Henderson customer, so we couldn't control the rates. There's intermediate, say 10 years or less, where again with some upgrades from Henderson, we could supply water to Carlinville for up to 10 years. That possibility would put water to the Lake Williamson property that I believe from your treatment plant, you build that tower there, where we could put it right into that 10-inch line, takes it right to your clear wells, dumps it right into your clear wells, use your own existing high service pumps and distribute to your customers like you do every day. However, and again, you'd be a Henderson customer, not a Litchfield customer. The long-term solution looked like the dedicated line between Litchfield and Carlinville, the two communities, and a joint partnership there where we could control the rates, with Carlinville, and you would be a customer of the city of Litchfield, not from another water district.
And what's the feasibility of laying an 18-inch line? I mean, we talking a year, 2 years, I mean, how long would it take to get water from Litchfield to here?
Well, that kind of depends on, again.
Let's say the money was all there and everything.
Well,
Let's just say that, how long would it take to actually physically get water from here to there?
How many miles are we talking?
16 miles, is that what you said, Steve?
Around 15.
When you first said that, I thought, well, right out Warner Lake, the county line, but you're gonna be on 16 probably.
Just north of that, yes.
I mean, I'm thinking if we went to a drought situation, or a drought year, I mean, are we talking, is it a year project? Is it 3 years? I mean, is it, what's the time frame? Because we know this thing with Jerseyville has to go to the federal government, get approved on, it's probably 2 to 3 year project minimum.
Probably a year to a year and a half, I'm hearing here.
If easements and funding, if everything's in place, if you're talking construction, probably, yes, it'd be about a year and a half or so.
Okay.
Now, and I will say that, excuse me, Ted, I will say that this will bring our plant to a more of an economic, we won't have to raise rates like we have to now. I would want to at least dedicate half of anything we got from Carlinville towards the enterprise fund, and the other half towards maintenance of our lakes so that the quality of water will always be there. And that would be my plan. Now, whether it goes through the council and stays that way, we can make some adjustments. But that would be my plan for longevity. We would always have a good water supply, and we would be able to take any of the revenue, or a portion of the revenue from Carlinville and from the other water districts to maintain our enterprise funds, so we don't have to raise rates.
I was gonna answer your question about getting easements for the pipeline. What Ray was referring to is it goes through the Henderson Water District, so they have first rights to selling water. As far as putting a pipeline in, the easements would come from the property owners or the highway, county highway.
So basically from the county line to Carbo's, we have 16 miles of easements to acquire.
Right.
Whereas to Jerseyville, we have 45 miles of easements to acquire. Basically, that's the project to Carlinville. There's more than that, but just to Carlinville is a 45-mile stretch.
Yeah, there's already some easements in place there as well. Exactly what would have to be easements and not, I don't know. I don't know what new agreements have to be made. Did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, Dan, I told you I wasn't gonna talk, but it's Matt Turley. You won the bet.
Yeah, I won the bet.
Two things, Steve. First, I was interested, you said that if there was a rate increase, I think you glossed on this, but we kind of skipped over to something else. If there was a rate increase, it would be the same for Litchfield residents as it would be for the other, the other customers as far as percentages.
That's I believe, if I'm not wrong, that's the current agreements.
That's actually built into the agreements that we have with all of our satellite supplies.
Okay.
That if we take an increase to our own customers, we pass that exact same increase on to them. So it's not like we raise our customers or our voters, so to speak, 2%, and everybody else 8%. It's flat across the board.
Okay, because that's interesting, because I used to live at Lake Williamson, and this is 20 years ago. But when the city of Carlinville increased our rates more than everybody else in town. So that's a better deal than I got from my own town, just for informational purposes. So if that, and the other thing is, I want to talk more about the thing with Flint. I mean, you said that, and I want to hear anybody else's opinion on that. Is that, I mean, that makes sense. That why do you want to change your, go from surface to groundwater? I mean, is that really a risk?
Ted, maybe you can talk about.
Well, I know a little bit about Flint. Flint actually switched from getting Lake Erie water to getting water from a river. They were both surface water.
Okay.
But they needed different treatment, and they were purchasing the water before from Detroit, and then they fired up an old water plant to handle the surface water. And they really had a corrosion issue, and they had personnel that really hadn't been operating water plants.
Okay.
So they were both surface water, but switching from, if you go to Litchfield, it'll still be surface water.
Right.
So people tend to get used to a certain taste in the water, not so
Okay.
much from a quality standpoint, but just the taste. If you switch to groundwater, it will have more of a well-water taste to it
Okay.
than compared to the surface water.
Okay.
I think you could address that by talking about Chatham and New Berlin, right? 'Cause you told us that same scenario before.
The good comparison there is just what we talked about in terms of the reaction of an ion exchange softened water versus a lime softened water. And the pH is really, that was the deal tripper for Chatham, was changing significantly the pH levels. And so the scale that forms over years and years on a system that's provided with lime softened water, you have a calcification of your water mains. And when you introduce a lower pH water, it tends to descale that calcification. They were not prepared to
It
contend
didn't
with that.
flush out properly, as you said,
That's
but
correct.
that's a good scenario, it meets what Matt,
It really is.
Matt was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you have to be forward-looking in terms of those type of reactions and potential changes in water dynamics when you're planning a system like this, and that rollout. The hindsight of the things Chatham could have done differently was be more aggressive on the front end with their flushing and treatment program in the mains. They've paid CNT now to do a flushing program, and I think they've had good luck doing that, but it's after the fact, 4 years hence.
Another example, we have a water district that we supply water to, the countywide water district, and when they were developing, they were going around, they wanted an agreement to buy water from Litchfield as one of the suppliers, from the city of Hillsborough as one of the suppliers, from the village of Witt as one of the suppliers, and the city of Nokomis as one of the suppliers. I just shook my head, and they got the system in the ground, and what happened is they're getting surface water from Litchfield and Hillsborough, but they're getting groundwater from Witt. Now, the groundwater characteristics are a lot different than they are with surface water. They don't have the disinfection byproduct, so they carry a pre-chlorine residual, where we have a chloramine. Well, whenever the surface water mixes in the line with the groundwater from Witt, they lose all their chlorine residuals, and there's potential for bacteria contamination. So they have all but stopped buying water from the village of Witt. They buy as little as possible because, again, they're mixing the surface and ground.
Just a couple things. I'm Christina Wise. I'm glad that someone asked about the Flint issue because I thought that was an interesting scare tactic since we would be purely a customer of Litchfield. And I'm curious, like, where did you say that we would like tap on 16? Is that where you would run to? And then we would get on there?
The County Line Road and 16.
Okay. And then,
By the state police building, right there.
Ready?
Yeah, north of it.
I just put it.
and then as far as like the whole tapping on thing, then if we are at the end of the line from Jerseyville, the pipe is still obviously big enough to hold us and growth, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so why would there not be growth if a new business comes and they have to tap on from like Litchfield, we have a new business and they have to tap on there. Or if we have the line from Jerseyville and it's by off Shipman Blacktop, I guess either direction, a new business has to link on. Is that right? Okay, so what is the horrible part about being on the end of the line from Jerseyville?
I think
I know it was raised
one of the
before.
things that Randy raised several months ago was just geography. Where is growth likely to happen? And Randy's point is, from a business attraction standpoint, less likely to pull a big industry in on Shipman Road versus highway to the north or east. So, and his point was if infrastructure's already in place, that makes it a more bankable piece of real estate. And those are really economic development considerations that become part of this conversation.
Has there been a business that said that they wouldn't come on Shipman Blacktop?
You asking me?
And is it
I
a
thought
place to
you're
rent?
No, I'm just saying there's no feasible property built on a Shipman Blacktop for a plant type facility. It's all hills and hollers and creeks. I mean, you don't really have that much flat area out there. Versus the infrastructure for bringing trucks in, you gotta come up on the railroad track, you bring in semis and stuff like that, you don't want to go up down the shipping blacktop, let alone come in on 108. I mean, you know, you gotta think about trucking industry bringing in a lot of jobs. You want to try to get as close to the interstate or good roads as you can. Shipping blacktop would not be considered a good semi-road.
Doesn't Walmart have semis that deliver stuff? I was just saying.
They do, but they're not, like, consider Prairie Farm. I mean, you have 40 to 50 trucks a day going up and down shipping blacktop. How long would shipping blacktop last? You know, I mean.
Yes.
Roger Suling. Having been on Litchfield Lake in the past several years, there's lots of spots out there where you can, in the middle of the lake, you can get out of the boat and stand up. Do you have a silting problem, or do you have any?
We have it on the north end of the lake, but if you stand up in the middle of that lake, you're wet.
No. I've been out there with the Simpsons many times, and boats have run aground. It has been shallow.
You're probably talking about where there was an island, but now it's above the island.
It's on the east side, about a third of the way from the dam.
Yeah, there was an island there, and now the water is over that island.
But you can still stand up on it. I mean, that's how shallow it is there.
But that's not where we're drawing water. We're drawing water at 35 feet depths.
Do you have a
We're
silting
not drawing
problem
from
there?
the center of the lake.
Do you have a silting problem there?
We do, and we're addressing it through 319 grant applications. And we're also adding another subdivision of homes out there, and some of the revenues from that is going to be used for lake preservation. We have a comprehensive plan. That lake's gonna last forever.
I would just add that the lake's about 5.5 miles long, and most of the sedimentation is occurring at the tributaries coming in the side and at the upper end of the lake.
The north end.
The north end, but the main body, say the lower 4 miles, are pretty much have very little silt in them at this point.
Most of our siltation problems arose in the early 70s, during the construction of I-55 with poor stormwater retainage.
Yeah, and we had a study done by the Corps of Engineers, and the estimates on the lake life that were done prior to that were found to be false, and the Corps of Engineers, I don't know how many, Dave, you remember how many years they added to that? It's not filling in as quickly as was suggested, and it's only on the north side, as we said, in the tributaries, and we have 2 coves that need to be cleaned out. But other than that, it's not a major problem. It is for those homeowners in those coves, but we're going to address that.
Yes, sir.
Sarah mentioned early on that all the options weren't being considered, only the ones that were where we could maintain control, that had been discussed at city council meetings up to maybe 4 years ago, I think she mentioned. So that all of these options, maybe even the Litchfield option, hasn't really gotten that much research by the committee or by the council. I assume that's the case, because there's things being mentioned here that I think nobody's heard before, or it seems that way to me. So my question is that something that the council has to, that they voted on at the time, not to consider anything other than full control or almost full control, or is that something that has to be changed by the council, or would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it was not a mandate. Okay. But the committee went through and discussed things, and the unofficial mandate, if you want to call it that we got, was that we wanted to explore the options that gave the city at least some control over our water source. We've never completely discounted any situation except for things that were just financially unfeasible. This one has been brought back up to our attention, and we are exploring it now. This meeting tonight is one of the examples of what we're trying to do, get input from everybody else if they're interested in doing that, and there will be no final decision until we've explored everything and come up with a good, solid comparison on whatever options are viable. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. Just on a quick follow-up with one of the things that we wanted to maintain control, rightfully so, is is the issue of cost, so that we wouldn't get stuck with rates being raised, et cetera. I think, I mean, that could pretty well be taken care of from a legal standpoint. I'm sure lots of attorneys can get involved and take care of that for many, many years down the road. And did I understand that there was some limits on raises? Was there some statutory limits on what you could raise the water rates to?
No, that's, the legislature mandates that your enterprise funds, your water and sewer funds are self-supporting. And that's the only reason that we raised rates in Litchfield, is to get up to that threshold where they support themselves. We're not near there at this point, because councils years past were leery about raising any rates for any purpose. But now they found that that's an error. That you can see it's happened all over the state, and probably all over the country, where rates have been increased 25% in just a couple of years because they're trying to catch up from the deficiencies.
Sure.
So, and we have basically, at this point, we're in a 3-year, we just passed a 3-year plan to raise rates, let's see, 2-year plan. 2-3% raises for the next 2 years, just to get those funds into the black again.
Okay.
So, but that's the only reason we raise rates, not to get rich and we want to keep our rates down for our citizens. And again, they're tied into the rates that we have wholesale.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Randy?
One concern I have with Brian in this is the deal Max has come up with is all preliminary. And Brian has said many times that we can't get hard numbers till we send this off to the federal government and come back with hard numbers to see if the dollar amounts can be feasible or not. Well, my problem with that is once you send a packet up to the federal government for study, they look at the easement, they look at the total cost, they might drop $2 to $3 million of governmental money into the project, and then they come back and then we say, you know what, your rates are gonna be 5 1/4. You know, but if we come up with this much money, then we have the option to say yes or no. Well, we've already spent $2 or $3 million of government money on this study. You know, so I'm saying we've already got the rate right now at a rate that we know we're not gonna gouge our customers, like Dick alluded to earlier, that, you know, we're an aging community and, you know, our water bills over the last year, we know that we've had issues, we hear about it all the time. So if we raise our rates to a high rate, we're gonna hear that big time from all of our water customers. So my point is, I don't wanna see us waste government money, because we have enough of the study, to me, I think from Max, the preliminary, to make the decision whether we go the preliminary route or we go with the Litchfield route. We don't need to waste any government money on having this packet vote to say, send it up to the government and get it done. An example to me, prior to being on the council, the train station that just come to town. When I got on the council, the train station, when it came back, was already come back from the government, 90% complete. The bid packet, everything was already done. So that my point is, once you ask the government to do something, they're gonna do due diligence, they're gonna put money into it and figure it out. And then you come back and say, it's done. And then you're gonna tell the government, well, we don't wanna go that route. I mean, that's, if we do the deal, that means we're gonna go with Jerseyville. So as a council, we need to say, we're gonna go Jerseyville, and that's what we're going with, and we know that's what we're going with. Dan, whatever the price will be, that's what it's gonna be, it's 5 1/4 and 5 1/4 to the customer. Because we said we're gonna go Jerseyville, we wasted the money, or we do it. And to me, that's crazy when you have an idea of already a rate that we could give our constituents or our customers now.
Anybody want to address it?
Well, I can. First off, I still haven't heard a figure on exactly what this is gonna cost us if we go to Litchfield. I mean, I've heard what they're gonna charge us per 1,000. I don't know what's gonna cost us to get to here. I don't know how long it's gonna take. I've heard estimates. I've got estimates. That's what I told you before. I need to have specific numbers. I don't think it's fair to anybody here or anybody in this town to go through and say, I wanna do this. I give you half the information, not want you to vote on it and tell me this is the way you want your water future to be. I want to have solid information on whatever options we're gonna consider. We'll consider every option, but I'm not willing to consider any option that only gives me half the information or a third of the information. I can't get the rest of the information on this side without having the authority to move forward as a unit with the co-op. I don't see how we're wasting any government money. I mean,
Cost millions.
it's not, I mean, this doesn't cost millions to put this together. This is a option to go through and say, here's what we can do, here's what the funding is, when we get all done, this is what it's gonna cost you. I wanna do the same thing with the Litchfield one.
Okay,
I don't have a final figure on Litchfield either.
We're willing to spend the money to do the Litchfield cost study also?
I have no problem with that. I
So
think we
I'm
need to
saying,
go through and get
if
the
you do one,
information.
you gotta do the other.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, that's fine, but you talked about not wasting money, okay? But if you don't do both of them, whether you're calling it wasting money or whatever, I call it investing money, because then you find out what your best option is. But if you go into it and you don't have all the information, I don't see how you can make a logical decision. And I don't think it's fair to anybody out here to go through and base the water future in this town on half-ass information.
Well, to my point, it's a quality service over there, and the rate right now is $1 lower than what our customers are already paying. So I'm not basically saying that it's a half-ass information. They're giving us enough information, all we don't know is the cost of the line is 16 miles. And we should be able to figure that out.
Absolutely, and we don't know. And all I wanna know is what it's gonna cost over here and what it's gonna cost over here. And if we don't move forward, we don't find out one of them. I don't think it's fair to go through and say, okay, we're gonna go through and do this real quick because it's a little bit closer, because it's the same thing. You accused us earlier, or not accused, mentioned earlier that we were deliberately not following other options. I say we follow every option, but you gotta give everyone a fair chance.
Brian, we did not follow Litchfield until February 20th, when we met with the Litchfield
You're
mayor.
absolutely right, we did
You
not.
guys have not been looking at that, any of the options, not even on the table. So the initiative was taken with Litchfield to bring them onto the table.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. That was an oversight, and I apologize as much as anybody else. It doesn't change the fact that I don't have all the information on this one or that one. And I will not move anything forward to the council until I've got enough information to where I can let them make an informed decision.
I just had a question of the whole system. You're talking about your drinking water system. Strictly just on the system itself, not who the heck we go to. When we're looking at options, I just don't know if this is gonna be looked at or not. Regionalization versus hooking onto another water system. As a part of that overall package from an economic standpoint, are you looking at the cost now? And then Litchfield's looking at, they bring in X amount per 1,000 gallons and they charge their customers to get their drinking and wastewater back up so it's equal. Now they've got their rates set. I assume they also looking at long-term viability of their entire system, utilizing those rates for the overall infrastructure. Carlinville's infrastructure is failing. It's ancient. I'm not talking about treatment plant, I'm just talking about the whole thing. Are we looking at cost measures too, that when we're done, we have X amount per gallon? That's just to build this thing for cost. Are we gonna have any implementation in there for saying, okay, we're gonna charge our customers $2, $3, $4 per 1,000 gallons? That's just to build this and for the rate. What about the existing system in place once we build a plant or regionalization? We have our plant, go with somebody else. What about the rest of the community after that? Is that taken into account?
We hope to, yes. I mean,
Well, it needs
and
to be.
there will have to be, to answer your question, I'm assuming what you're asking is whether the master meter comes from Litchfield or the master meter comes from a co-op out of Jerseyville.
Yep.
Okay, that will be X number of dollars.
Yep.
Whatever ends up being negotiated. To have any kind of infrastructure, long-term program, there will have to be a markup from that dollar to whatever we're gonna charge the citizens.
Yep.
Okay, that's not really gonna change, it doesn't matter which one you bring it from. If
It
you're gonna
does
add a
if
dollar
your,
to
it
it,
does, sir, if your cost per 1,000 gallons is less, and you leave your rate alone, and you put the cost savings into an account and leave it alone, so your infrastructure over time can be built. I'm talking about the infrastructure from off the right of way to the treatment plant. You're not gonna fix that. This is just gonna get you water. It's a viable source to the community. I'm talking about fixing any other improvements in town.
yeah.
That
from-
doesn't matter if we go with regionalization or if we go, I'm just saying overall
that's what
cost
he's saying.
savings, if you're looking at
Uh-huh.
the cost to the consumer, to us, or to anybody else putting a business in, whether it's industrial or residential. Just getting your water here, wherever it's from.
Right.
Then building that in at the savings or higher cost, whatever your per 1,000 gallon rate is. You also gotta have money, like you said, there's gonna be a markup somewhere.
Right.
Is that markup also gonna include, or is that also gonna include an additional markup? Because you still have infrastructure that has to be maintained.
Oh, yeah, we have the infrastructure.
You have a
fund in
separate
town
fund.
now. We have that now.
And you have the money to,
We're doing it now.
We're
Yeah,
doing
I mean,
it now.
it's being done
$2
now.
All
million
around town?
worth in the last 3
I
years.
mean, how much?
$2 million in the last 3 years. Two $450,000 grants and, well, 1.5, am I correct back there, Ronnie? 1.5 that we just entered into a contract with a year ago for a 5-year deal of replacing,
And is that all,
4-inch
okay, you're doing
line.
that, fine. Is that all figured into the rates we have now? Or are we gonna say, okay, to keep maintaining that, we're gonna build this and then we're gonna have another cost increase at some point?
It's all being done
Because
now.
people are throwing a fit around this town, because we all know that the water rate's so crazy for various reasons. We won't get into that debate. I'm not here to debate that. But when it's all said and done, and we hopefully get that figured out at some point, and then maybe it is. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at overall cost there then, and you gotta look at, are you jacking them up again to maintain an account? Or is it a figure, a whole picture, where your rates are gonna be maintained per 1,000 gallons? That's all I'm saying, overall. Because we're the ones paying it, and we're the ones that, you know, overall gotta say, screw it, we're not gonna go do it, or we're gonna allow you to do it. The council can vote to do it, but there could be a referendum on a ballot or something like that if enough people throw a fit. But we gotta pay the rates overall. I'm just wanting to know, okay, if you go with $2 and something here, or $3 and something here, we're already at $3.80 or whatever. Is that $3.80 that we're paying now built into, or is money set aside into the fund? Or are we gonna be looking at rates there, and then we're gonna get stuck again with
Those rates,
something else?
those rates are self-sustaining, like, just like he was saying earlier.
That's
That
all
you
I
have to
want.
maintain. The infrastructure account that we use for this now comes out of the 1% sales tax that we passed 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Okay.
That's the infrastructure fund, if that answers your question.
Not totally 100%,
Well-
because we are adding money, although it will take care of that. We have added some money from the water fund,
Yep.
because we've generated revenue. And just a little tidbit I'm gonna pass on. There's the potential for a regional concept to not change the rate whatsoever and debt service directly to Carlinville. Potential. And if you want explanation, I can give it. And in 2014, there was a comparison that would probably come close to relating to the potential of debt service that may be equal to Litchfield, which would possibly increase the cost increase per customer per month. Today's customer, and this was done in July 23rd of 2014, would be somewhere between $50 and $70 per customer for base rate.
To do what?
Debt service, between $50 and $70.
For what? I missed, for what?
For debt service, if we were to go to something that's comparable to Litchfield,
And what's our debt service gonna be the other way?
0.
It's not gonna cost us a
Potential to-
penny to build
potential to
several
zero.
$million worth of stuff.
Potential to 0.
You'd have to show me
And
those
that's been
numbers over
explained.
20 to 30 years.
The entity incurs the debt. If Carlinville was to happen to,
Our rates
If
won't go up
Carlinville
at
was
all,
hap-
they're zero, zero.
do you want me to explain? I will.
Okay, I just wanna make sure I get a
If-
full explanation.
If there's the such a thing as a seed money that would be when the entity's formed, now let's just use this number. If Carlinville puts in 50,000, the other entities put in 50,000. If it's $100,000 up front, in the process of the loans and paybacks coming back, it could still be down to 0. Where Carlinville, at the end of the day, when the first thing's going out the door, Carlinville and every other entity could potentially be to 0. The entity that's formed, whatever the regional would be, it won't be a gateway because it'd be a different name. That entity assumes the debt and they pay it back per 1,000 for the purchase. So your answer is 0, 0, potentially for the regional deal, and somewhere possibly between 50 and 70, I can read them little numbers, 7206.
So Carlinville has the money, or these other three communities or entities have enough money to slap down so that there's no cost passed down to us?
And it hasn't even got that far yet. That can't be answered.
Well, that's
But
what I'm
we're
asking, is that
doing.
gonna be
That's what we're
researched?
doing. That's what
People
we're
wanna
doing.
know, what's it gonna cost me in my pocket per month now, for 5 or 10 years from now? Now, you know, you have cost of living stuff, but they just wanna know, what am I gonna be paying? That's what they wanna know.
And that's what we want to move forward and
Not,
find out.
we hope
not
that's what
$50
you
to
want.
$72 for a minimum
Yeah, we'll
base
do
rate increase for your debt service, that's for sure.
So this meeting was to get more information for you folks, et cetera, and get us some questions answered. So my question is now tomorrow, after this meeting, you've got tons of information that this gentleman and his engineering firm, I assume, have provided you on all kinds of dollars, what it costs to do all kinds of things. For the one method, you don't have near all that stuff for potentially Litchfield, what it takes to run that line, et cetera. So what's your next step? What's your commission or the council's next steps moving forward now at this point?
Well, as the committee, we're going to have to go through and waste some government money and do some more research to find out exactly what our final expense will be per customer, per thousand, whatever base figure you want to use, to find out exactly what it's going to cost us to run it from Litchfield. We will also need to get permission to take the next step forward to find out more specifics on what it will cost us, same basic figure from the co-op. That's where we're at right now. That's why I want to do this tonight. I wanted to get some of the public and also the members of the committee to hear both sides, because I want to make sure that everybody understood that this committee has not tried to be biased. We have tried to stay unbiased. There's been an oversight that early in the system, we were interested basically in either our own water system or a co-op. When we first originally went to Litchfield, they were not interested. I don't know who they talked to, I can't swear to this, but that they were not interested in any kind of a co-op, and you're still not. See, so our mandate, we thought at that time, was not written down, was that we were looking for some sort of water system that would go through and allow us a certain level of control, okay? They were not interested in doing that. They went off the table.
Well,
Okay.
8 years ago, if you wanted to share that $14 million expense,
I've been there. 8 years ago, if we'd had to come in, we might have talked about it, but we didn't. So anyway, so that's how we got to where we're at now, okay? It has been brought up that we really need to go back and revisit this option about becoming a water customer and not a water supplier. Okay, so we're gonna have to get more information to find out exactly what that's gonna cost us. We also have the option of going through and being a member of a co-op and being a water supplier to ourselves, okay? Right now, I have to have more information on both of those, because as the chair of the committee, I will not make a recommendation to the council right now on either one of these systems.
Chairman Mitchell, I might say in regards to the debt service, although that debt service would be in your name only, the only way that's gonna get paid off by anybody that holds that debt service is from your
Water customer.
Your water customers.
That's our collateral. I don't know, we didn't really get that far, but did that answer your question too?
Yeah, it did.
Our collateral, our input into this co-op is basically, we pay the bill on whatever comes through that master meter to that entity, which is also us. We will be part of that entity.
My concern in reading newspaper articles, and I understand, I take those with a grain of salt, because there can be a little bit of spin on those, but my concern was that, not knowing that somebody made a decision at some point that we wanted to be in total control, which I understand. My concern was that for the city of Carlinville, where my grandkids are gonna be raised, that all of the viable, reasonable options were looked into as fully as they could be. And until that happened, I don't think the city council could make a good, intelligent, objective decision. And what I was reading at least was that this option of the co-op was getting all kinds of research, et cetera, but anything else that was getting brought up wasn't getting very much. And so it's reassuring to me, though you want to be cynical about wasting government money or something, which I know you don't believe, that we're going to jump in and look at both of these two at least, what seemed to me to be very reasonable on my limited knowledge.
Okay, I'll address that. Okay, for one thing, one of the reasons all the other attention ended up going to this was because once we, and this is very initially, once we got into it and we kind of weaned everything else out because we weren't coming up with a whole lot of options where we maintained any level of control.
Sure.
Then we were able to get that grant. Well, the grant was not for water source options across the board. They were for the co-op. So it got all the attention. Now, it's been brought to our attention that we need to go through it and consider that again. And, like I say, if it looks like it serves the interest of Carlinville to by far be a water customer and not a water supplier, then that will probably be the way it ends up going. I personally don't think that's the best way to go, but I'm only one person. I mean, I'm looking at it, and I'm not gonna make any decisions, and I'm not gonna move anything forward until we've got, I think, well, you've heard tonight, I don't think we got enough information on either option to make an informed decision. And until we do, I don't think we're going to. So that, yes, sir?
Tim, when we're done, after this, I'm ready for it to be over when it's over, but can I see that $50 to $75 stuff or whatever you have that I can?
Right here, you're welcome to it.
Okay.
It was part of a study done in 14 that initially started it all. Very public, very open.
Now, anybody got, yes?
Just one other quick comment in relation to Gateway. That involved a lot of communities and water districts over a lot of years. One of the things you won't find in the numbers that I don't think those folks were prepared for is they assumed they were gonna bump the rates every single year because of cost of salaries and chemicals and everything else, just like you would imagine. And what happened was, we talked a lot about economic growth potential. When there was growth in any one of those communities or when another community added on, that benefited everybody. And that's what would happen here in a regional scenario. Jerseyville, for example, is talking about a huge railroad undertaking project. If that happens, that benefits everybody in the region, because in that system, it's a cost per thousand basis. As Max has probably calculated these numbers. And, you know, it's an economy of scale. The more you produce and sell, the lower that cost per thousand gets. So that was one big reason they were able to maintain those rates flat for 8 years.
I hope that's true, but in the last council meeting, Kim sat there and said that each entity would be, rates could be different across the board. In your last council
They can make
meeting,
their own. They're not charged a different rate. If it costs per thousand and Carlinville wishes to tack on
So the rate is the
a
same
service
to
of
all
whatever,
entities.
or if Jerseyville Rural Water, that's
I'm
their own
saying,
entity to
the
make
base
up.
rate is the same to all entities there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
At Gateway, for example, there are currently 14 entities that are served by that regional system. They have the same per thousand rate for all 14 entities. And just to give you an example, they have some that are 20,000 plus in size of community, and one community of 500. And they've agreed to cooperate so well that each of those 14 has an equal seat at that table. I'm not saying that's the way this regional entity would work out, but those are decisions that would have to be made local.
Thank you. Bill?
Two questions. First one will be for you, and the second one is for Max. The first question for you is, a while ago you said you didn't consider it a waste of government money if it's for knowledge. Why do you consider it a waste of money to consider their proposal?
He was being sarcastic.
He was being sarcastic.
Right, he was just
Okay,
being
well, the second one is for Max then. Getting back to beating a dead horse here, you kind of got onto water quality of the, coming out of the aquifer rather than the quantity of water. What I was really getting at earlier is, okay, consider climate change. We run into a summer of 3-4 months of drought. Every farmer in the Mississippi and Illinois Valley are irrigating their fields. Is that going to affect that well? Is that going to prevent it from drawing enough water to serve all these communities?
Very good question. And again, because of the scale of that aquifer, it is the most viable bank that will not go down to a deficit situation for what we're seeing. If you look at the Illinois River gradient, it's a very flat gradient. And so there is a tremendous impact. If you look at, compare it to a lake, look at that surface area that bounds, the impact of droughts is greatly reduced because of that expanse. So, yeah, if you have more farmers pulling out of irrigation wells, those are things that you have to look at in terms of separation distances. The bigger thing that you're going to be concerned with is the cross-influence of multiple wells, because this isn't going to be served by one well, is making sure that you strategically place each well, that when they're utilized in concert, one well doesn't adversely impact the yield of adjacent wells. It's called what we in the industry call cone of depression. There's an angle of repose of that groundwater as it's extracted that pulls down closest to the well, and then that radiates out in a cone-shaped fashion. So when we're siting new wells, we try to position them so that there's not an adverse impact on adjacent wells within that aquifer. You look at the same thing on a bigger scale in terms of potential irrigation load. What we're seeing on the center pivots are anywhere up to 2,000 gallon a minute withdrawn. So those are the kind of capacity numbers that we'll look at, just to make sure that we don't have proximity issues. But in terms of a global concern of a drought imposing water restrictions because of the static water levels are depleted, we don't see that historically in that aquifer. And again, I encourage anybody, it's a quick Google exercise to go to Illinois State Water Survey well database. And there's an interface that you can log on to on your browser, and it gives you the ability to query any geographic region and then start looking at the wells that populate that region. And it has a plethora of data. It's just a huge, it's an engineer's dream because of the amount of data that's accessible. And again, it will give you the date, the drill depth, the driller typically, and the yields. If they've done well testing, you'll actually see what that particular well has been tested at. Okay. And so again, but those are great questions, and those are a lot of the planning tools that we looked at during one of our meetings, probably 3 or 4 meetings ago. Somebody said, well, didn't you look at Standard City? There's a ton of wells up in Standard City. Okay. From a geology standpoint, it didn't look like it was a viable source, and it didn't come up with our short list when we did the regional queries, but we specifically went back and looked. There is a ton of wells in Standard City, and we're not talking 100 gallon a minute wells. And that was the problem, is there's not the sustained yield there. But again, those are great things to be concerned about, is long-term viability.
Ken?
Question for you, Brian. Ken Reed. What is the cost to take the regional option to the next level so you can get some more concrete information, in particular cost and timeline? What is that?
There is no cost for the next level.
The next, to take it to the next step to find out the better information, there is no cost at all?
Essentially, all I need is agreement from the council or representatives from whoever, the committee, the council, whoever.
But it doesn't commit us necessarily.
That's correct.
So you still have an opt-out?
Well, until you form a contract to put this co-op together, there is no.
So Randy, what's your hesitation then? I'm not understanding that.
My hesitation is that you're asking the government to do the feasibility of the cost of the easements and all this, because you'd have to figure out all the cost of the easements, and if there's any virgin soil where you get these scientific studies, if any snail or anything along the way, it all have to be studied to see if you're disrupting any area on those easements. So there is a cost involved. Might be not to Carlinville, but somebody's gonna pay for all that study being done. Is that not true, Max? Is that all the different studies that has to be put together for easements?
It's gonna directly cost us to find out to go from Litchfield to here to do that.
Well, that's another topic. I'm asking about the regional option.
Timing issue.
When you say, when you say there's no cost, is it already because it's covered in the grant, the 30